the buildings of the Menier chocolate factory at Noisiel in France, designed between 1872 and 1906 by the architects Saulnier, Logre and Sauvestre. Chocolate was introduced into Europe in the 15th century and was for a long time considered as a luxury product and a medicine, made and sold by apothecaries. But by the early 19th century, the invention of the chocolate bar and the development of taste made it an everyday consumer product. An industry was created in answer to the demand. It is made from the seeds of the cacao fruit, shelled, ground and mixed with sugar. While production was traditional, the seeds were ground by hand or by mill wheels turned by donkeys or horses. But to produce chocolate by the ton, the new industry sought another energy source that was abundant and free: water. Water that turned the mill wheels and became the principal motor of the Industrial Revolution. In 1825, one of these pioneers of chocolate, the chemist Menier, bought an old water mill on the river Marne at Noisiel near Paris. During the following decades, the consecutive enlargements of the mill showed the success of his enterprise. (1872) sees a radical change. Of the old mill, only 3 stone piles are kept, and a 4th pile is added. The wooden building above was demolished. In its place, the architect Jules Saulnier built one of the most innovative factories of his time, the hydraulic-powered factory at Noisiel, the main building of the world's biggest chocolate factory. The force and constancy of the flow of the Noisiel waterfall had been appreciated since the Middle Ages. In the new factory, the old water wheels were replaced by 3 modern turbines that no longer exist today. The propeller shaft transmitted the movement of the turbines to dozens of machines installed on the 3 floors. While power went upwards, the production process was in the opposite direction. The cacao seeds were ground on the 3rd floor. The resulting paste, called liquor, was kneaded and then mixed with sugar on the floors below. To bear the weight and the vibrations of dozens of machines all working at the same time, wood was not enough. A new material was called for. That was iron. Iron had been in general use since the middle of the 19th century and had been in service on the factory site 10 years earlier. That was merely for the roof of a workshop, of which only the framework survives. Its stresses and delicacy had little in common with the new mill that was without doubt the first building in the world built on a completely metal skeleton. On top of the 4 piles, between which the turbines were set up, the architect placed a large frame made of girders and angle irons. This frame served as a basis for the metallic structure of the building, like a big cage on which the floors and walls were to be hung. It is a giant mechanostructure made of iron and cast iron pieces bolted and riveted together, made possible by the development of puddling and the perfection of rolling iron, without which it would not be possible to manufacture such large components. Outside poles in galvanized sheet metal supporting the facade reach right up to the cornice. The interior columns and consoles carry the first 2 floors. There are no columns on the second floor. The floor is suspended from the roof structure on metal tie beams, which frees it from the need of any load-bearing elements. The whole building is braced by a diagonal lattice that maintains the exact verticality of the metal poles. It is more than a question of structural performance. Metal is everything here. It's in the window frames and the lacework that decorates the arches, in the partitions, the steps of the staircase in striated cast iron covered in the stoneware tiles. The building is systematic, as rational as the industrial process for which it was built. A mechanical building for housing machines. The production process dictated the internal organization. The architect Menier found freedom only on the outside. He decided, it was unique at that time, to display the metal of the structure, the great girders at the base, and especially the diamond shapes of the braces, that apart from their job of maintaining vertical stability, divided the facades into independent elements and so reduced the risk of fissure due to vibration from the machines. Each diamond has a brick infill. The bricks are like a skin. They form the walls of the building, but have no load-bearing function. The infill is double. On the outside, the 11-centimetre bricks are laid flat. Inside, 6-centimetre bricks are laid on edge. The bricks inside are plastered for reasons of hygiene. But on the outside, the architect let the brickwork show. It is the only decoration, bricks of every type. White natural clay bricks for the ground. Grey bricks, dyed before baking, for the counterpoint patterning of the metal diamond shapes. The junctions of the diamonds are emphasized by false staples made of black enameled bricks. The same black bricks, along with others enameled red or yellow, form simple, surprisingly effective geometric patterns. The subdued and soft shades harmonize with the sky, the trees, and the water. This elegance is not an end in itself. This is industry and commerce, and the architect reminds us of this by scattering the facade with explicit motifs. Roundels of enamelled bricks surround large terracotta discs. On the perimeter are the outer shells of the cacao fruit. In the centre there is the cacao flower. M for Menier, or another motif that suggests the toothed gear wheels of the factory's machines. Such luxurious decorations for a simple factory may seem to us to be light-hearted, naive, almost childish. At the time, they were regarded as the height of modernity. Ceramics are the true paintings for monuments, noted a contemporary review. When this type of decorations is understood in France as it is in the Orient, it will give our grey and pallid cities the gaiety and variety that they lack. It was also an excellent investment. The combination of metal and enamelled brick caused a sensation. The building was described in reviews, cited as an example, visited by foreign delegations. The prestige was reflected on the goods produced there. and helped the Menier chocolate to stand out from its rivals. It was doubtless the first time that architecture was also used in the service of a brand image. The person responsible for this success was Émile Justin Menier, who was a gift to the caricaturists of the period. Extremely rich and a convinced Republican, he was a paradox. Next to his model factory, he had an estate of workers' individual houses built, because he believed that there was no industrial success without social progress. He died in 1881. On the monument raised in the main square of the Menier estate, the bronze bas-reliefs recalled how he had transformed an old mill into a modern factory. His successors, although less politically engaged, continued his aspirations for development and his sense of publicity. But there was a change of direction. A new image emerged from the factory's printing presses, replacing the picture of the factory. This was the famous little girl writing the brand name on the wall, a picture that appeared on everything. They were no longer content to show, with the pride of a manufacturer, a picture of the factory so justly idealized. It was the beginning of the world of the imaginary personage, of fantasy and seduction. With gadgets, like this revolving pointer and its slogans. The weight of Menier chocolate produced in 6 months equals the weight of the Eiffel Tower, claims this poster. In 1882, they started on a new building intended to house the cooling plant, new artificial refrigerators. Once again, iron allied to brick triumphed. Today, this building is still called the Eiffel Hall, because for a long time it was thought that it had originated from a pavilion created by the Eiffel Workshop for the 1878 Universal Exhibition. The attribution is wrong, but it is the work of an engineer rather than an architect. It was signed by Jules Logre, the chief engineer and manager of the factory. Contrary to Saulnier's mill, it is a single-storey building, a simple hall protected by a roof. Baltard developed this type of structure, known as an umbrella roof, where the columns only bear the weight of the roofing, 30 years earlier, in particular for the market halls in Paris. Less original, less innovative than the Saulnier mill, the cooling plant building is still a splendid incarnation of the spirit of 19th century iron architecture. The hall is lit and ventilated by a glass roof. The cooling plant functions with ammonia. The machines on the ground cool the chocolate, which after moulding is stocked in cellars reached by an underground gallery that has now been made into an exhibition area. Outside, the metal and bricks are still visible, but their relationship seems to be reversed. This time, the ironwork is brought forward as a decorative element. The fluted cast iron columns with their capitals and the neo-Gothic style window frames all show a desire to treat metal as a noble material. However, the design of the brick infill is much more restrained. The colouring is reduced to a simple band of enamelled bricks and discrete variations of dyed bricks. They continue the decorative motif of the mill, the diamond, but no longer with any structural justification. Curiously, it is the back of the building that has the richest metallic ornamentation, with magnificent arabesques that embellish the lancet arches, while the symmetrical matching part on the front of the building is treated in a much more cursory fashion. In fact, the rear of the building is built into the slope, and the richly decorated tympanum overhangs a door that gives straight onto a little balcony, from which guests of the Menier family could admire the machines and the men at work. One of the key points of the factory at Noisiel was the care given to organising the production line. Everything was done to rationalise the various stages in the transformation of cacao seeds into chocolate. From shop to shop, the product being worked on travelled on small trolleys on a network of narrow rails set into the ceramic flooring, chosen for hygienic reasons. From 1889 onwards, the site was linked to the main railway network. This was a linear process. All the shops were aligned on the same riverbank in the same direction as the flow and the order of manufacture. The raw materials arrived by boat or train upstream where they were prepared. Then after the chocolate was made in the mill, the product passed downstream through the different shops, moulding, cooling, packaging and dispatch. But with the start of the 20th century, the development of the brand demanded a new building. For lack of space on the left bank, they had to cross the river. This was 30 years after the Saulnier mill was built, the last great architectural moment on the Noisiel site. The official name for the new building, built between 1906 and 1908, was the New Chocolate Factory, but everyone called it the Cathedral. The cathedral succeeded the mill. It now dominated the site and proclaimed the ambitions for the brand. The new chocolate factory consecrated the triumph of a new material, concrete, which was to dominate the architecture of the 20th century as iron had dominated the 19th. The 700-ton building with its 900 square metre area was built on the unstable ground of an island. The engineer Armand Considère used 1,200 concrete piles of his own invention to reach the bedrock 12 metres below. The building is 8 stories high but is built in terraces. The position of the cornices and the height of the pilasters are intended to give the impression that there are only 4 stories, which accentuates its monumental aspect. Nothing here makes it possible to guess at the structure, its purpose, or the identity of the owner, whose monogram, formerly omnipresent, has disappeared. This is a different vision of industrial architecture, due to the architect Stéphane Sauvestre, mostly known for his residential buildings. The factory shop was decorated like a palace. Anonymous and imposing, the new factory translated the aspirations of an industrial middle class looking for legitimacy. But take away from the cathedral its Ancien Régime accoutrement, its decorative veneer of cornices, pilasters and bosses in false-dressed stone. What is left is a simple, severe and economic structure, perfectly well adapted to this size of building. The construction principle is modular. This is clearly seen in the building site photos. Vertical poles, horizontal beams supporting the flooring slabs, the inside looks like a ballroom. VIP visitors entered by a double flight of stairs worthy of an opera house. The stairs opened onto a bridge whose dimensions made it a positive reception area, overlooking the workshops spread out below. From the bridge, the guests could watch the ceremonial mixing of the cacao paste with sugar, the most precious part of the process of chocolate making. The machines that stood in the two large ground floor rooms have long since gone. All that remains are the cast iron pillars holding up the ceiling, with their bases redecorated during the restoration work. When the shop was working, these pillars were hardly visible behind the white tubes down which the cacao paste travelled to the mixers. The workman is looking up. The photographer is on the bridge. The spectacle of the architecture has given way to the architecture of the spectacle. The new building imposed new logistics, new routing. After the cacao was ground in the mill, the paste was delivered to the cathedral through underground tubes. Once it had been mixed, the chocolate was returned to the moulding and packaging shops that remained on the other bank. For that, they built a bridge. Nothing can show the structural and plastic possibilities of concrete better than this work that crosses the River Marne in a single 44.5-metre span, a record for its time. But behind the engineer's success lies an industrial error. The toing and froing between the two banks became too complicated, and the cathedral was, in spite of the ambitions for it, the only failure on the Noisille site. It was oversized and never operated at more than 50% capacity, unlike the mill that remained a high-performance industrial tool right to the end of its days. Menier dominated the global chocolate industry up until the 1930s. But the time of architecture was over. Then came the decline. Despite the efforts to modernize its image, the company was unable to overcome the shock of the economic crisis and slowly declined until its collapse in the 60s. The buildings survived. They are witness to the spectacular development of industrial architecture in the 19th century. In a single generation, it went from iron to concrete, from the exuberant enthusiasm of the Moulin Saulnier to the chilly monumentality of the cathedral. Two faces of architecture, two conceptions of the world.